Now, for years, civil society organizations and gender-based violence activists have called on the government to put policies in place to address the staggering levels of violence against women, children and the queer community in the country. Activists say that the newly released Gender-Based Violence National Strategic Plan will reduce cases of crimes against women, children and LGBTQIA+ individuals. To speak to us about the legislative framework and the process behind the National Strategic Plan, we're joined by Director of the Initiative for Strategic Litigation in Africa, Sibongile Ndashe. Sibongile, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn, Channel 405. Now, can you give us a brief background about the National Strategic Plan?
Good morning and thank you very much for having me on the show. The National Strategic Plan is not the first National Strategic Plan. We've had a lot of them over the last while, but most of them have not been able to achieve the result, and this is evidenced by the high levels of violence, gender-based violence and femicide that we continue to experience in the country. So in the past 2 years, there's been quite a lot that has been happening. And I'm saying this background to say that this work did not start in the past 2 years, but that there was this renewal of energy and focus, and people who were not kind of traditionally associated with non-governmental organizations came together, and said, we are going to shut down this country if we are not able to do that. And I think we saw a total shutdown in 2018, followed by the presidential summit. And the presidential summit came up with a declaration, which was a roadmap on how we were going to go together. And that led to the establishment of the Inter-Ministerial Committee that worked to draft this national strategic plan that we now have. This process was finalized in April, and I think it's something that was just not publicized a lot because it came in as we were beginning to really see this response to COVID. And so it's something that kind of faded into the background. So this work having happened, it's that we all now have a national strategic plan. That is a space for us to begin to imagine once again what a South Africa that is free from gender-based violence and femicide could look like. So it's a very comprehensive document. It does have a lot of the things that we asked for in the 24 demands, most of the things that came from the summit. And so where we are right now is about whether we can agree on how we go about in implementing this document that we are happy, to have, even if there are some things that are still not clear on how we are going to go forward. But there is a framework that has been provided, and many people are quite excited, about it. And so we just want to be able to agree on the way forward.
So what is the official process now that we have a strategic plan? Does the process include training police officers, for instance, to deal with people who are reporting a rape? Does it include government giving more money for rape kits, etc.? What will the process be like going forward?
So there are the things that are contained in the National Strategic Plan, the pillars. So what it is that we will have to do as a country in order to be able to respond. And so the National Strategic Plan established about 6 pillars. And the things that we have not kind of looked at more intently in the past. So, for example, there is a very decisive link that this National Strategic Plan is making between women's lower socioeconomic status and violence. And so it talks about economic justice as a key pillar, right, in order to help us respond better to gender-based violence and femicide. So that's a very big thing to be able to add in a national strategic plan that deals with it, because in the past, I think it has been this work of training police and all of those things. And so there are things like that, but that's not the sole focus, because the truth is the problem with the police is not that they have not been trained. There are a lot of non-governmental organizations that have been doing this work over time. The big problem with the police has really been about lack of accountability and impunity, and there have been really no consequences, for their failure to support victims and survivors of violence. So we have a strategic plan that doesn't look at what is considered, the obvious. It says, what are we going to do in order to bring about the attitudinal changes, the gender stereotyping of women in this kind of process? What are these causes of these levels of gender-based violence? So there is a focus on prevention work. There is a focus on changing attitudes work in this the strategic plan. So we're not just going for let's train and train and train and train. And we are saying, or the National Strategic Plan is saying, let us look at this problem, holistically. Where does it start? So sometimes people talk about what we call agents of socialization. How are people brought up, that make them believe that they have power over other people's bodies, that they have to be able, to decide for people, in that even when a person says that this relationship doesn't work for me, that what normally ends up happening is someone gets killed. So what's in this National Strategic Plan? It's basically all of those things. And these are things that just don't come anywhere. There's evidence, on what works. So quite a lot of comparative work, comparative models were used in order to think about how to respond to this crisis that we are facing. So those are the things that are in the National Strategic Plan. But the official process as it stands now, and I think that's why this webinar series that we're going to talk about is important, it's that whilst the National Strategic Plan was adopted in April, what we saw in June was something that was disconcerting. The Inter-Ministerial Committee, which is basically a structure that has been put together, and also a structure that's in the National Strategic Plan, which is made up of various ministries in government. And this is something that we really asked for in the 2040 demands, that we need to be able to have this high-level coordination, because it does matter who is leading this response to gender-based violence and femicide. So it's a good thing that we have this Inter-Ministerial Committee, because it also reduces the fragmentation in the system, where we do not have people who are ultimately accountable. Department of Health says, no, this is not our thing. Department of Justice says no. Social Development says no. So we, in the past, we just ended up having people who were passing the buck. So there is nothing wrong about having the Inter-Ministerial Committee, something that we liked. But what was very concerning was their plan to fast-track the implementation of the National Strategic Plan. And their manner of fast-tracking the National Strategic Plan was by beginning to actually act against what has been agreed to. So the National Strategic Plan mandates the Department of Justice with setting up this legislative framework, which is a law that is now supposed to guide how this is going to happen. So they opted to develop the terms of reference, because they said there was a crisis and we just cannot wait anymore. And that is something that is really concerning, that the first action in terms of this National Strategic Plan is to go against it. Because the reason why we need a law as opposed to policies is exactly what they are showing us, that we do agree to things with government, and they go and they do the other things, and then we do not have tools for holding them accountable. So when something is not done in accordance with the law, then it becomes very easy to say that this action is invalid and it needs to be reversed. So that is why it was important for us to say that we needed to have the law. So right now, that process seems to have been stopped, although there hasn't been no official communication. But what they were fast-tracking was the setting up of this National Council. So we started this webinar series to say, we need to be able to go together. We understand that there was no publicizing of this National Strategic Plan, but if we want people to be part of implementation of this plan, people need to know what's inside this plan so that they know how to act, but more importantly, how to hold the state accountable. And so that's why we have now started this process of the webinars.
All right. In closing, Sibongile, this webinar, can you give me more details on how we could join? Is it open to anyone and everybody? Yeah, just in 1 minute, can you just quickly let me know about the webinar?
Webinars are on broadcast on Facebook. There is a page called a Call to Action South Africa. We have a Twitter account as well, Call to Action. So you can go there and you will get all the details. You can subscribe. We've got a WhatsApp business line where you can get all the information and also register to join the link. It's every Thursday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and it's open to the public. We are now on week 5 and then we have 7 more weeks, because at the end of this process, we want people to make submissions on the kind of counsel they'd like to have, the law, and more importantly, the funding mechanisms that are going to help us implement this and support civil society in carrying out this work.
Sibongile Ndashe, thank you for your time talking about the National Strategic Plan. She's the Executive Director of the Initiative for the Strategic Litigation in Africa. And she's speaking to us about this National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. It was officially released in April, and they are hosting webinars every Thursday. Just look out for them on Facebook and to find out more details. Like I mentioned, or she mentioned, it was released in April, and of course it came out at a time when we were all grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you need more information on that, have a look at their Facebook.